of mine. You found someone new, but I can't change my love the way that you do.
This is the story of a lost neighborhood and of its people who did not want to go.
I don't want no money. I want my home. The old man is old. See how the old man is old? No more. That's enough. I don't want to get out. I said to my two daughters, they don't want to get out too because they spend a lot of money. Plenty of money they spend in this place. We not get none to nobody. Never.
Welcome to the West Ender Video Newsletter. I was interviewed by Melissa Hurley on her show, Middlesex Update, which is a great show. She does it for most of the cities and towns in Middlesex. So I'm going to show you that show tonight because I think it was a great show, and it'll run on my show. The same subject matter, so it'll all work out right. So, okay, roll tape, Joe.
Hi, I'm Melissa Hurley, and tonight we have with us a very special guest, Jim Campano, who many of you may recognize. He's on many local cable televisions across Massachusetts, and especially in the greater Boston. He actually is the editor and publisher of a newspaper, the West Ender, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And he's just an all-around active guy. So, Jim, I want to thank you for being on the program.
I appreciate being here, too.
And we've had you on before. We've talked before.
Right.
It's interesting to have the hosts on of other cable access programs as well sometimes, too. It's a lot of fun. So tell me about, you grew up in the West End.
Yeah,
and the West End just kind of dispersed throughout greater Boston, and there's many West Enders living throughout Massachusetts and probably New England. Tell me about growing up in the West End.
All through Middlesex, too, right? And the good thing about being on like a show like yours is because we have a lot of people in Everett and Malden. Well, we're on in Malden, but Revere and, the different, anyways, Reading and Middlesex County that we don't get to. So once in a while, it's good that they can see. Well, growing up in the West End was a whole different story. It was, in that era, there were a whole lot of neighborhoods like that, the North End, Southie, a whole host of neighborhoods that were similar, that working class, blue collar, neighborhoods. But the West End was a little different. For some reason, it seemed to have gelled and melded better, not better, I don't want to use the word better, but into this big mixing pot, that all the different, there was 22 different ethnic and racial compositions there.
Oh,
the New York streets were similar, which was the actual first, the two big projects in Boston were the New York streets, which is where the Boston Herald is today. And the reason they called them New York streets was because they were all named after New York cities.
Oh, okay.
And it didn't work that well because nobody wanted to build down there. So they went looking for a neighborhood in a good location, and they came to the West End. But getting back to the makeup, so you grew up with different people and different kinds of, you had different kinds of foods, and I mean, you went from, you had Albanian friends, you had Irish friends, you had...
So as much as the West Ender neighborhood was like any other neighborhood in Boston, it really was unique, because if you think about the North End was predominantly Italian, there's South Boston, all the different areas, whereas you're saying in the West End, 22 different ethnics. I mean, right now in Boston, I think they have 20 or 22 different neighborhoods, so that's really amazing.
Well, Boston was one of the most segregated cities, and I'm not talking about black and white. Boston was one of the most segregated cities in the country, because you had all the Irish in one section. A lot of the other cities, they had like Irish and Italian sections, but most of the city was still dispersed. Where in Boston, the only two were the New York streets and the West End. And so there was a distinct feeling in the West End that, you met different people and you talked to different people. And
did you have neighborhood schools? So you went to
we did until you got to high school. We didn't have high schools. You had to go outside of the neighborhood. You had to go to, matter of fact, the North End and the West End both. There were no high schools other than the North End had Christopher Columbus, which was a Catholic school.
So these kids in your neighborhood, you were going to school with them, you were playing with them after school. If you did any type of after-school activities, they most likely were probably in your
football.
group.
We had football teams, baseball teams. It was really a great neighborhood to grow up in. I mean, I had a good time. I suppose some people didn't like it, but most of the people I talked to, most of us really had a good time growing up there.
Right.
I mean, but would it have stayed the same? I don't know. But at least we would, if they didn't tear it down, at least we would have had the opportunity to do it on our own.
Now, just for some of the folks who are watching and may not know exactly where it is, the West End section that we're talking about is in the city of Boston, and it's over by the Fleet Center.
Right.
What?
Bounded by Beacon Hill.
Okay.
Beacon Hill on one side, the Charles River on the other, the Tip O'Neill Building and the Fleet Center on this side. Right. And the North End on the other side. Okay. And so it was that sort of enclave. And it's funny because I was talking to one of a West Ender who wrote a book called The Priest, and when we were talking, I had him on the show, and we were talking about the West End, and he said, well, Herb Gans wrote this book, Urban Villages, which is another thing, and everybody uses urban villages now to describe their little place in the city, but that was coined for West Enders. Okay. Urban villager was Herb Gans' term for West Enders. And so we're the originals, and we're the first, and we're the originals. And he said that because we were bounded, we had the Boston Brahmins on Beacon Hill in the freight yards. In those days, where the Tip O'Neill building is and the Fleet Center is now, they were all railroad yards. And we were sort of off all by ourselves. So he said he felt that by being there, we sort of developed as our own little colony and became the mores and cultures. The West End was different in one big way that I think than other parts of the city was.
What's that?
A lot of the other cities, when you went there, you had to live there 10 or 15 years to really be accepted. Whereas the West End would, they would take you in and you were pretty much a member of the community, unless you did something that, transcended all the neighborhood taboos. And then it would be, it would be different. You'd be shunned. You might as well just moved up. But that was one of the best things. I mean, I've spent after I tore the West End down, I spent a lot of time in the North End because that was like a sister community to us. So many West Enders were of Italian descent that came from the North End that basically there was, a movement back and forth. It was sort of a sister community. I spent some time in South Boston. One of my friends was in the military, and he spent time with South Boston guys, and we used to go down there and have a few grooves in the bars. And it's a good neighborhood and everything. But, I mean, most of these neighborhoods had their own little, they were distrustful strangers. Right. More like Europe. In Europe, that was true, too. So, but that was basically, the West End was more like an open society. I guess with that many, ethnic groups and, racial compositions.
Right. So what year did the West End neighborhood really disintegrate?
Well, they started taking it down. There was a lot of money. HUD had a lot of money for slum removal. So they went into the West End and they tore the West End down. They started in '58. They finished in '61, I believe. Okay. And then they took the second half, where the Lindemann Center is today. They left like 20 acres of the older section, which is funny because they tore down the newer section of the West End. They left the 20 acres, and then they eventually took that for the government center. Okay. So in a period from 1958 to about '68, they destroyed the whole West End. They tore it down and ripped it up by its roots.
So by 1970, you'd say that everyone had moved out of the West End?
1970 it was gone. Okay. I mean, it was probably gone about 1965 because there were the buildings and everything for the Lindemann Center and everything. I guess they were started about 64 or 65. So around 65, they took the second section and everything changed.
And as I said earlier, you publish and edit a newsletter or newspaper, The West Ender, and you have the show. What started all this? When did you start? After you moved out and after you kind of tried to go back to life as normal, you probably decided that, there's always something missing, and you were talking to your friends from the West End. How did you decide to do something about that?
Most of us, like, we all felt that we were the only ones that were missing the place. And one year, I was going to California, and one of my friends said, we're having a reunion over at Camp Gannett in Sharon, which was a camp, the Peabody House here in Somerville runs it now, but in those days it was the West End had it. So they were going to have a reunion.
In Sharon, is that what you said?
Sharon, yeah, on Lake Massapequa. And I said, well, I can't make it. He says, well, see if you can, right? So when I came back, he said, well, we had a great time. And so I went, I said, well, I'll run my own one then. I went down there and rented the camper, and we had a cookout reunion, and I think about, one of my friends went around and took down the names and addresses of everybody that was there, and there was about 125 of them. So I took the names. They were sitting on my table in my parlor, and so instead of every year having to, because I called everybody on that list up on the telephone, I said instead of doing it on the phone every year, why don't I just put together, and it was a one-page mimeograph, just the front,
Right.
West Ender, and I put it together and I sent it out. Next thing I know, there was 250 people on the list, and it was a page and a half mimeographed, not mini Xerox, and then it was 400, then it was 2,000, and at the peak when we were free, and now we charge for it. But at the beginning,
That's very nominal.
Yeah, it was nominal. We had like 4,200.
Oh, wow.
And that was, it's developed.
It's really, it's an interesting paper because you have the benefactors and the patrons and all your supporters on there at the beginning.
right.
So I'm sure when people look through it, if someone's new to reading the paper, they'll see
Right.
someone they may remember. And then it has the news about the West End. And one thing that I found really interesting was you collected a lot of photos from other readers. And I mean, there are photos in here from, we actually found a photo of Jim when he was 16.
There's a 16-year-old kid in there that's
16
handsome.
years old, yeah. I mean, that's amazing. And then we have here summer of 1957, some fellows on a lake in Worcester. You have obituaries from people from the West End that have passed away.
Unfortunately, we've lost quite a few people. There are not a lot of West Enders left.
But it is nice, though, because at least you're keeping people that may know them. And then St. Joseph's Parish, you have the 140th anniversary, and you've talked about St. Joseph's a lot on your show.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We've been very supportive of St. Joseph's because I was in the West End.
Right.
That was an institution
that was
everybody
right in the
went
West
to.
End, right? Yeah. And we even have photo identification. This photo ran in the last issue of the West Ender, September 2003. The young man in the second row, second from left, who's been identified.
Oh, that's right.
Someone wrote in to say that it was her uncle.
That was St. Joseph's Elementary School, and
okay.
they had a class picture of it, and whoever sent it in, he put question mark on that one, and that's
great. That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me about the paper. You're the editor.
I'm
you
the
do all
editor.
the stories yourself.
Right.
It looks like you have a few contributors. And
Well-
how do you decide on who's going to write the stories and you're going to write
Well,
them?
sometimes I write stories. Sometimes I decide that if there's something that I want to put in. I guess the one that was really telling was the time my brother died, and I wrote a story about him. It was like a front page obituary with his picture. And I got a lot of people called me in, and they thought it was very interesting. Or I'll go in, like now people send stuff in. If I have enough of their stuff, I put their stuff in because I believe that that's what everybody's looking for. See, when I first started the first newsletter, I thought it was going to be about what's happening today with their kids and who they married. And nobody wanted to do that. All they wanted to do was talk about the old days.
That's
so
nice.
that's what it developed into. So I let people, if I have to, I put in mostly their memories because that's what everybody's basically looking for. I'll put in contemporary stuff if I have to put it in for whatever the reason. Like say I think it's politically timed right now, or if I think that something should be said. But I basically leave it to the people that send in their memories.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think that's, these are your readers. You should let them decide how they want it. You know what else is really nice, too, is that for those that have children or grandkids, it's a nice memento to be able to give them. So and to look through it, and maybe they'll see one of their school friends from school is in there, or maybe they'll see themselves like you did. We saw a picture when you were 16. Really nice to go show the grandkids. And
yeah, I forgot I look like that.
But this is great. This is great. So did you start doing this, and then you started doing the show? Or
Yeah. Well, what happened was
what it went first?
then we started getting a little political. Okay, we started. When at first I never thought we'd do anything but put out the paper and do memories.
Right.
And then under the Flynn administration, they decided to give us a museum and they'd do all this type of thing. So we started advocating and becoming more political. So that's basically, I said to myself, this is fine because everybody that reads the paper knows what we're talking about, but I'm preaching to the choir there.
Right.
I said, you know, and I came down here, not because I wanted to start a show originally. I came down here, the Chronicle came down, they wanted to do a story on us.
Mm-hmm.
And they started walking, and they had one of these L-shaped mics.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept looking down at it, and we had to start like 5 times, then it started raining, so they eventually canceled the whole thing. So I said, you know...
So you're never on?
No, never on.
Oh.
At that time, I've been on Chronicle
okay,
about 4 times.
Okay.
So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go down there. Let me take a few lessons and classes, get in front of the camera. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's great.
Get used
That's
to
great.
it, okay? Well, I was down here, and then Abigail was here, and she was very supportive. She said, why don't you start a show? I said, oh, let me say, I'll do one, right? And we did one, then we did 2, and then next thing you know, it's 170 now.
You've done 170?
170. We shoot every month.
Every month, right. So it's a monthly program. Is it half an hour?
Half an hour, yeah.
Half an hour. And you've had so many guests on. I mean, with do you try to keep one guest per segment?
Yeah, well, not so
or
much
have
one guest.
One issue anyway.
One issue, yeah. We try to keep to one issue per segment. I had Ray Flynn on again last week. Last
great.
month. Yeah.
Great.
I like Ray. He's a good man.
Yeah, does he still have the radio show?
I don't know if he still has the radio show, and I didn't ask him. You know, come to think of it, I didn't ask him, but he was just so supportive of us when he was mayor that I love the guy. And
Tell me some of your favorite interviews.
John O'Connor.
Yeah, very nice person.
Oh, great guy.
Great guy.
Which was unfortunate because 2 months I had him on the show 2 months before he died, and we were sitting here talking about Ed Kelly, who we both knew. Matter of fact, he worked for John. And he's saying, Ed died. I said, gee, no, I didn't know. And 2 months later, John was gone. It's like, wow. Unfortunately. And they were both great people. They were both great people.
Now, because John grew up in Connecticut, so how did he relate?
I knew Ed before I knew John.
Right.
And Ed had me on as one of the 10 scientists on the electric deregulation fight. And I met John through that, and I got to know him that way. But there, he had the Greenworks and everything. He was a good guy, really good guy. Ed Kelly was a great guy too. Unfortunately, like they say, the good die young.
Right, right. So tell me a few other favorite memories of the shows.
Back so long. And then we take like tapes of there was a feast in the West End. Somebody had tapes of the feast in the West End. We ran a show with the tapes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we've run a lot of old tape. We find like 8mm tapes and we put them on video. Yeah. And
those are yours, or do people send them in?
People. Well, we take them, tape them, and send them back. There's a whole host of them. I'm trying to think of who else we've had. City councilors on, and from Boston. We had Shannon O'Brien before she became the treasurer.
The treasurer.
When she was on the show with a broken leg.
Oh. When she had the skiing accident.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. It's just been so long and so varied. We try to not to do the same thing like too close to each show, and I think you'd probably do the same thing.
Right. Well, that's great. I think you're doing a great service for everyone. I'm sure there are a lot of people that either do subscribe to the newspaper or maybe aren't able to and enjoy watching your show.
A lot of people don't even know what the West End is anymore, especially like in the last couple of years. Most of the Herald and the Globe, most of the reporters on them, there's a lot of them leaving. Most of the institutional memory is gone. So I had a reporter call me up from the Globe the other day, and she was talking about, she didn't know anything about the West End. What is the West End? And here in Somerville, some people think I'm talking about the West End of Boston. I mean, the West End of Somerville. So it gets, it's strange,
Well, let's talk about some of the West End place in the West End. And I know that I remember seeing one of your shows, and you had the groundbreaking.
Oh, that was
so
way
many
back,
people. Yeah.
We had all. We had
and we saw all the photos,
Ted Kennedy,
and we had it,
Bill Weld. Bill Weld was governor. No, we didn't have Tip O'Neill at that time. It was Bonnie Franks. I was sitting next to Bonnie Frank. We had Bonnie Frank, Ted Kennedy, the mayor, Menino. There was a whole host of them. I'm trying to think of Billy Bolger. He emceed the show. It was like, he's a very funny man, whether you liked him or not.
No, he's a
whether you liked him or not, he's a good host. And unfortunately, the sound went right when I and another West Ender got up to comment on what was happening. In the paper, I made an analogy between Brigadoon and the West End, you know, coming back, you know, and they wrote it in the paper, so maybe the people up front could at least hear what I was saying.
Could hear it, right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was a great groundbreaking. And it looked like we were going to go so far with this.
Right, right.
And in the end, we ended up in a lawsuit that tied us up for we fought over the preference for, which was now, you look back, may have been a silly suit. And because of that, our partners, the Archdiocese of Boston and Bob Keene, decided that we broke our contract with them and they didn't have to give us the museum. And we ended up in another 5 or 6 years with the litigation, and we finally have it now, and we're trying to work through it.
I can remember when you were, you spent some time picketing for the West End.
Yeah, we did some of that too. We
Right.
did that, and we were out in front of the place, and you know, fighting for our rights. I mean, some people think I'm crazy. You know, they think that I just want to go out and attack people, but that's not true.
You're fighting for what you believe in,
and well, it's not even that. If you want to help me and you want to work with me, I'll never attack you. I'm the old time stand-up guy, routine from the West End and North End. If you're good to me, I'll be good to you. If you're good to me, I'll be twice as good to you, because that's how you get along.
Right.
Unfortunately, we had a fight for. If they're not going to give you what you deserve, you have to fight for it. And if you attack an institution, it's very funny, because I always thought you attack an institution, you just you only attack them. But what happens is all of them, they all get together because they all intermingle with each other on so many levels that when you attack one, they circle the wagons, and you're probably the odd man out, and it gets very hard.
The West End Place, that's the museum?
That's the museum.
Did it include any housing or anything
else?
No, it was just the museum?
Totally dispersed, not dispersed, but we're totally separated from the housing. There's just the museum and the office spaces for the Old West End Housing Corporation and the West End.
And that's, the museum that's a very large museum. It's a good size. Good size, yeah. Yeah, and you have plans to open it in the spring?
Well, we have plans to open in the spring, but it won't be acting like a real museum, probably. It'll probably just be lectures and maybe a small, exhibits. Well, we have an exhibit that was at the Bostonian Society in 1992. It was an award-winning exhibit.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
What was it?
We're going to have to. It was about the West End, and it had
photos or?
All photos, interactive video, fire escape with statues on it, and there was a stoop. But from what I understand, the stoop they had a kid. They couldn't disassemble. They had to break it up. But somebody said they had plans for it over at the Bostonian Society, so we could probably put it together. But that's going to cost money to reestablish.
Right.
But it'll be done. Everything will be done. It'll just probably take a little more time than I would like or other people would like.
So it's painted. And what else does it look like? Is it just a big room?
Well, we're going to need flooring. Okay, we need some kind of flooring, and if somebody out there wants to donate it, we're a 501c3 that it's tax deductible. We need if somebody could donate. To have lectures, we need about 100 chairs and a dais. And somebody wanted to donate some of that, and probably some video equipment, a large screen tape player or a DVD player where we could run some of the memorabilia we have that's in film. A lot of the film we have in video we're going to change over to DVD, so we'll be able to run it and show people different facets of the Old West End when it was still up. Matter of fact, we have a slide presentation that we give a walk through the Old West End. There's 76 pictures of Herb Gans. Herb Gans took just before they tore the West End down. And we used to I give it at the library, I gave it at the State House, and we give a walk through the Old West End, and we describe it and we talk about it.
Oh, interesting.
So
what we're saying here is you have the space, but now we need to fill it. Your website is thewestendernews.com. So thewestendernews.com.
Well, that's my website, yeah.
Right, that's the website, but they can probably contact you on there.
Yeah, they can
once they go to that. And then contact Jim is also, his phone number is 617-628-2479. But it's really, it's a great property, and it's a great piece of space. And you know, I hope that you're able to get it up and running. And you probably also, there'll come a time when you'll need interns or just people to volunteer to
Sure.
to show the patrons.
Just like I say, right now we're trying to get the place built out, and when we get it, we're going to have probably a few dances, a few, you know, get-togethers for former West Enders, you know, raise money and to solidify our roots. You know, a lot of the people that I don't know if a lot of the people that I used to know are still alive, because a lot of them are dying quickly.
Yeah.
So we'll be using it as a community space for former West Enders. We'll try to do everything we can to get former West Enders in there. The only big problem with it is that there is really no parking down there.
Right.
So it gets a little tough for, and most of West Enders are 55 or above.
Right.
So in that sense, it may be a little rough for some of the people. But there's a lot of West Enders living in the Blackstone apartments and over at the Charles River Park. And I'm sure we'll have people in there all times. There was some discussion, because I don't know if we'll be able to find the material, is to put a 50s fountain, soda fountain in there.
Oh.
So, you know, it'd be sitting there and everybody.
Oh, so it's like the 50s?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It'll be an exhibit plus a moneymaker. You'll be able to sell sodas and, you know, maybe ice cream. I don't really know. But it's an idea. Even if we can't sell the ice cream and everything, it'll still be a good exhibit. If we can find it, we'd have to, you know, scour all these different.
You can go on eBay.
Yeah, that's an idea. That's right. You know.
So your long-term vision for the West End, as far as the museum? You want it to be a working museum where you have the lectures, you have the social gatherings, you can place for West Enders to bring family, even West Enders who may have passed away, for their family to come, bring their children, what have you.
Exhibits. There are a lot of ideas, and of course there's a lot of space between the ideas and the the reality.
Right.
So we have to close that up. But I think it'll work. It'll eventually. We'll eventually get it going. It may not go as fast as some of us would like.
Right.
But we'll get it done.
Well, really, I want to thank you again for being on the program. It was such a joy to talk to you today. You've done so much. You have quite an active extracurricular social life. You know, you publish the West Ender. You have the West End show. You're a man about town. You're always for this cause and for that cause. There's a West End museum. Someday it'll become a reality because of you, Jim. And you must have wonderful memories that you can.
Oh, I do.
Think about,
it was a fun place to grow up in, and I guess I missed it a lot. Most of us missed it a lot. Like I say, we didn't realize. Most of us thought that we were the only ones that had that. It was hidden inside us, and nobody else had that feeling. But when we had that first reunion, we had. I'm not talking about the Camp Gannett one. I'm talking about we had one at Wonderland Ballroom where there's 2,000 people, and man, that was.
Oh, 2,000 people came?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
That was unbelievable. It was a great time, and it was the first time we really got together, and it was fun. The place was mobbed. It was unbelievable.
Well, I want to thank you again. It was nice to talk to you tonight. And it's Jim Campano talking about the West End, and I'm Melissa Hurley. And we will have to have you back on the program again, and we can reminisce another time.
Sure. That was me being interviewed on Middlesex Update with Melissa Hurley. Hope to see you at the next West Ender video newsletter.